My father fired me after believing my brother's lies. 6 months later, I sold the company he loved. Hi, I'm Liam, 38, and the day my life blew apart started with my father looking me dead in the eye and saying, "You're no longer my son." That's the kind of sentence that should come with thunder or a camera zoom. Instead, it came with the flat fluorescent hum of Parker Industrial's conference room and the smell of cold coffee fitting, considering I'd given 12 years of my life to that place. 12 years of sweat, loyalty, and broken knuckles, all erased in 20 minutes because my brother told a prettier lie than I could tell the truth. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't even get to finish my sentence. Security grabbed my arms like I was a violent criminal instead of the operations director who'd spent the last decade fixing messes for a family that never really saw me. One of them even apologized under his breath while he walked me out, which would have been comforting if I wasn't too busy trying to understand how the hell my own father had decided I stole almost $500,000. Spoiler: I didn't steal a cent. But the guy who did was sitting in the VP sales office 2 doors down, probably with his feet up, smiling that golden boy smile he'd been rehearsing since childhood. Sean. 2 years younger. 2 times the charm. 0 times the work ethic. While I loaded trucks in freezing warehouses at dawn, he was in some state college frat house double-fisting beers and letting dad bankroll his education. When he finally joined the company, he skipped the ladder entirely straight to a corner office and a salary higher than mine despite the fact he couldn't read a shipping manifest without squinting. Dad said he had natural charisma. I said he had natural excuses. But charisma apparently wins. The day I got dragged out, everything I'd suspected for months snapped into sharp focus. The missing inventory. The mismatched invoices. The mysterious vendors. The money bleeding out of accounts like the company had sprung a leak only I could hear. I had brought a binder full of evidence. Sean brought fake purchase orders with my forged signature. Guess which one my father believed? Here's the part one still tastes like metal when I think about it. When he shoved the resignation letter toward me and said, "Sign it or I'll have you in handcuffs before you hit the parking lot," I could tell he meant it. Not because he had proof he didn't, but because he wanted to believe it. Believing I was a thief was easier than accepting his golden son had been bleeding the company dry. So I signed. I walked out with 3 garbage bags of belongings, a bank account barely scraping $2,000, and a father who'd erased me in a single afternoon. And that's how I ended up living out of my car, eating cold ramen with bottled water from gas stations, wondering how the hell I went from operations director to Walmart parking lot drifter in under 72 hours. But here's the thing about getting shoved off a cliff. If you survive the fall, you climb back up different. Sharper. Harder. And a lot less forgiving. 6 months later, I was the one standing in front of my father, this time with the real evidence. The kind that didn't just expose Sean. The kind that detonated the entire Parker empire from the inside out. And now Sean is the one begging me for help. Let me tell you something they don't put in business textbooks. Rock bottom smells like old French fries, spilled energy drinks, and the inside of a Walmart bathroom at 2 a.m. Picture this: 38-year-old me, Liam Parker, former operations director, sleeping in the back seat of a car designed for someone the size of a middle schooler. I'd roll over at night and set off my own horn with my knee. Real classy. But before all that humiliation came the moment everything truly tilted sideways. 3 days after my father fired me, he summoned me back to his office. Not to apologize. Not to ask about the discrepancies I found. Not even to let me talk. No. He called me in so my brother could finish gutting me. I walked into the room expecting a yelling match. Instead, I found Sean leaning back in a chair like he was posing for a magazine cover titled Nepotism Monthly. HR was there too, with a folder already open on the table. My father didn't even look at me when he said, "We've completed an internal review." Internal review? Sure. More like internal assassination. They slid the folder toward me, and there it was. My signature. My authorization codes. Purchase orders for nearly $400,000 in parts from vendors I had never even heard of. Every document was a mirror copy of the real transactions I'd flagged from Sean, except now they had my name on them. My brother had literally photocopied his own crimes, swapped out the name, and slapped them on the table like a magician revealing a card trick. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room spun. My father's voice sounded underwater. "You stole from this family," he said. "You're sick." Sean murmured sympathetically, hand on my father's shoulder. Projecting your guilt onto me, it's sad, Liam. Sad? That was the moment I realized my brother didn't just want the company. He wanted me gone. Dead to the family. Erased. I tried to explain. I told them the signatures were forged. Told them the system must have been tampered with. Told them Sean knew my login. Dad cut me off with the coldest sentence I've ever heard. I'm not your father anymore. The security guards escorted me out. One whispered, Sorry, man. Like he was burying me. In less than an hour I lost my job, my home, my car, my reputation, my family. Dad threatened prison unless I signed a resignation letter. So I signed, because when a man with money and lawyers wants you in cuffs, arguing is just a hobby for the naive. And that was it. 12 years of service traded in for 3 garbage bags and a get out or I call the cops. That night, I stared at the roof of my car and realized something ugly. Sean didn't just win. He made sure I couldn't fight back. No job reference. No severance. No apartment. No credit. No way to defend myself. No father. Just cold air creeping in through cracked windows and a sinking feeling that maybe, just maybe, I really was alone in the world. But here's where the story started to shift. Because sometimes the universe hands you a knife when someone else thinks they've disarmed you. And in my case, that knife showed up in the form of an email. From Arthur. The one man with math colder than any lie my brother could invent. The attachment he sent me? That was the first crack in the wall my brother built. The first thread that would unravel everything. And the moment I opened it, I knew the climb back up had begun. Here's where everything flipped fast, sharp, and loud enough to wake the dead parts of me I thought were gone forever. It happened on a Tuesday. I was in my shoebox apartment, the kind where the paint peels like sunburn and the radiator sounds like it's killing someone at 3 a.m., eating dollar store pasta straight from the pot because I didn't own plates anymore. My email pinged. Unknown sender. No subject. One attachment. Normally, that's how horror movies start. But I opened it anyway, because when you've slept in your car, fear becomes a luxury you can't afford. The file loaded. Rows and rows of numbers exploded across my cracked screen: purchase orders, vendor lists, expense reports, bank transfers. And every one of them was marked in red. At the bottom, a single line. You were right. I'm sorry I didn't stand with you. Start here. Arthur. My fork hit the floor. Arthur, the CFO who sold me out for job security. The man who sat silent in the room while Sean lied with the smoothness of a televangelist. The man who'd watched me get dragged away like a criminal. He just handed me the smoking gun. And this wasn't just data. This was 3 years of the company's financial veins opened wide. I went still. Completely still. Like a sniper lining up a shot. Then I started digging. At first, it was just small things: a vendor email that didn't match its supposed website, a purchase order number reused twice, a shipping address that didn't exist on any map. But the deeper I went, the more the story roared to life. A fabrication shop in Ohio replied to one of my inquiries. We haven't done business with Parker Industrial since 2019. The purchase order in my file? Dated 8 months ago, $47,000 worth of custom parts. I called a supplier in Nevada. Disconnected number. A logistics firm in Utah? Never heard of us. Half the vendors didn't exist. The other half didn't know they existed in our books, anyway. This was a ghost city built out of forged paperwork. The mastermind? My brother. Sean had created a perfect embezzlement machine. Fake vendors. Real vendors who didn't know they were being used. Kickback deals. Inflated expenses. Shell companies registered in Delaware. Hundreds of transactions, none big enough to trigger alarms. He built a money laundering labyrinth so convincing that even forensic accountants would have had to squint. But he made one mistake. He forgot I notice everything. Every missing bolt. Every mismatched date. Every invoice that smells wrong. By day 6, I wasn't sleeping. I was wired, half caffeine, half fury, half the adrenaline of a man who suddenly realizes he might not be crazy after all. By day 9, I'd built spreadsheets so detailed NASA could have used them to launch rockets. By day 12, I had a complete financial autopsy. And when the final number stared back at me, I laughed. Not a happy laugh. A holy hell, my brother is about to go to prison laugh. $892,000. That's how much Sean had siphoned off. Not 300 grand. Not 500. $892,000. Almost $1 million skimmed out of the company through 217 separate transactions. All with his digital fingerprints. He hadn't just robbed the company. He'd robbed our entire family. And my father, the same man who called me no longer his son, had defended him with the kind of blind faith usually reserved for cult leaders and golden retrievers. That night, around 5 a.m., I sat in my dim apartment holding a flash drive with my entire rebuilt life on it. Evidence solid enough to bury Sean. Solid enough to clear me. Solid enough to tear Parker Industrial apart. But I didn't call the cops. No. Justice was too small. Retribution was too easy. I wanted something else, something colder, sharper, permanent. I wanted my father to realize the cost of choosing the wrong son. And that's when the real plan began. A plan that would end with the company sold, my brother in handcuffs, and my father looking at me with the kind of regret that shakes a man to pieces. The turning point wasn't the evidence. It was the moment I realized I wasn't climbing back to where I was. I was climbing higher. Much higher. And I was bringing their whole empire down with me. I didn't sleep for almost 36 hours after finishing the audit. Not because I was tired, no, I was humming with voltage. Like someone had plugged my spine into a generator. But I had a problem. A mountain of evidence was one thing. Getting someone powerful enough to use it was another. If I walked into the police station, Sean would spin it as a desperate revenge stunt. Dad would back him. HR would lose documents. And Parker Industrial would lawyer up so hard they'd bury me under motions until I died of old age. I needed someone with leverage. Someone with appetite. Someone who wouldn't hesitate to put a knife into a competitor, especially one as old and stubborn as my father. Enter Connolly Manufacturing. They'd been circling Parker Industrial like sharks for years. Always sniffing around, always trying to buy the company. Dad rejected them every time, called them corporate vultures, and the McDonald's of manufacturing. Translation. He hated that they were richer, faster, and better. So I called them. Didn't email. Didn't submit a request. I called the corporate acquisitions line and said one sentence. I have information about Parker Industrial that your VP of acquisitions will want to see immediately. 30 minutes later, the secretary put me on his calendar. Next day, I showed up at Connolly's headquarters wearing the best shirt I still owned, still wrinkled, because my iron had died around the same time my car did. Adrian Connolly, VP of acquisitions, looked me up and down like he wasn't sure if I was there to present evidence or to ask for spare change. You've got 15 minutes, he said. Impress me. I slid the folder across his desk. Then I watched a corporate killer read through 217 documented crimes committed by my brother. The man didn't blink. Didn't sip his coffee. Didn't even twitch. 45 minutes later, he closed the folder slowly, like he'd just been handed the keys to a kingdom. This is airtight, he said. Yes, I said. And nobody knows except you and me. And you're giving it to us because I want to watch my father realize he destroyed the wrong son. Adrian stared at me for a long moment, calculating, impressed, maybe even a little afraid of me. Then he said what I'd been waiting for. Let's discuss your salary expectations. That was the moment the ground shifted. Not when Sean forged my name. Not when Dad disowned me. Not even when I slept in my car. It was right there, in that office, where a man with power and resources leaned back in his chair and said, "You're valuable." That word hit harder than any insult my father ever threw. I left Connolly with a contract. A real job. A real office. A real salary. And the green light for the most precise corporate strike I'd ever execute. Within weeks, Connolly fired their first shot, an acquisition offer sent directly to Parker Industrial's board, hinting politely that financial irregularities required immediate investigation. Dad refused the offer in under an hour. So Connolly fired shot number 2. A detailed, terrifying letter sent to every board member outlining every discrepancy I had uncovered. It didn't accuse Sean outright. It didn't have to. Board members panicked. Investors smelled blood. An emergency audit was ordered. My father fought it tooth and nail, but he was outvoted. And then the forensic accountants arrived. Boxes of files. Laptops. Hard drives. Coffee cups. Gloves. The whole crime scene treatment. 2 weeks in, they found everything I found. 6 weeks in, the number they calculated was higher than mine. $1,098,000 stolen. More than $1 million siphoned off by the golden child. And right when the FBI knocked on my father's door with a warrant? Right when the empire started collapsing? Right when my brother tried to run for the airport. Dad had a heart attack. Not the fatal kind. The humiliating kind. The kind that happens when the truth crushes a man who refused to look at it. And while he was lying in a hospital bed, pale and furious, Connolly sent the second acquisition offer. $18 million. Take it or watch the company die. My father didn't call his lawyers. He didn't call the board. He called one person. Me. The son he threw away. And when I walked into that hospital room, he finally looked like a man who understood the cost of choosing the wrong son. When I walked into that hospital room, the first thing I noticed wasn't the machines or the antiseptic smell, it was how small my father looked. Larry Parker had always been a big man. Not physically, no, he was built like an impatient scarecrow, but in presence. Loud voice. Bigger temper. The kind of guy who could walk into a union meeting and make men twice his size sit up straight. But now, he looked like a deflated version of the man who once told me I wasn't his son. Sunken eyes. Gray skin. Trembling hands. A man crushed not by a heart attack, but by consequences. Liam, he wheezed, voice thin. I didn't sit. I didn't rush to his side. I didn't even pretend to be concerned. I stood at the foot of the bed like I was the one visiting a client, not a father. You wanted to see me, I said. He swallowed hard like the words hurt. Arthur told me. He stopped, breath hitching. What Sean did. What I did to you. I waited. I wasn't about to help him finish his sentences. For once in his life, he could do the heavy lifting. I made a mistake, he whispered. No, I said. You made a choice. His eyes shut like the truth physically struck him. You chose to believe Sean without looking at evidence. You chose to fire me without investigating. You chose to throw me out on the street. You chose to humiliate me in front of the entire company. His breathing sped up. Liam. I stepped closer, not with compassion, but precision. You don't get to call me your son when you only meant it as long as I was useful. His face crumpled. I didn't know. He whispered. Yes, you did. You just didn't care. His jaw trembled. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that once fixed my bike when I was a kid, now gripping the blanket like he was drowning. I'm sorry. The words sounded like he'd pulled them through broken glass. And maybe, once upon a time, that sorry would have meant something. But not now. Not after 6 months of sleeping in a car, stocking hardware shelves, and watching my life burn because he chose the prettier liar. It's too late for sorry, I said. He closed his eyes again, whether from pain or shame, I didn't know. Then he asked the question he really called me there for. What should I do about Connolly's offer? There it was. Not, how do I fix what I did? Not, how do I apologize for ruining your life? Not, how do I make this right? No. He wanted business advice. I let that disappointment settle in my chest like dust. Sell, I said. Take the $18 million before the federal investigation drops the value to zero. His breath rattled. And you? He asked quietly. What happens to you? I almost laughed. I'm working for Connolly, I said. Director of Operations. 40% more than I ever made at Parker. His eyes opened wide, hollow, stunned. Connolly? He whispered. You're helping them? No, I said. I'm helping myself. Something you taught me to do. His throat bobbed. Liam. I didn't want to lose you. You did, I said. 6 months ago. I turned toward the door. Enjoy Arizona, I added. The warm weather will be good for your heart. Liam, please. I paused. Just once. You disowned me, I said softly. Now I'm returning the favor. Then I walked out and let the door close behind me. 2 days later, he signed the deal. Parker Industrial Supply was gone. Sean was indicted. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the forgotten son. I was the reckoning. The morning the acquisition became official, I woke up before my alarm, not to go stock shelves or catch the first bus, but because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Connolly's internal announcement email. Board statements. Investor alerts. And a message from Adrian, the man who turned my evidence into a corporate guillotine. Welcome to the team, Liam. Full integration meeting at 9. Bring the files. Read. Bring the coffin nails for what's left of your family's empire. I showered, shaved, put on a shirt that didn't look like it had been rolled in a ball under my bed, though to be fair, it had, and headed to my new office, a real office, with a real door, and actual lighting that didn't buzz like it wanted to devour me. Connolly didn't waste time. They practically sprinted into the ruins like contractors who'd been waiting years to bulldoze an old house. Every asset, every machine, every contract, every employee. Absorbed. Rebranded. Rebuilt. My new job? Make sure the transition didn't kill anyone. Meanwhile, back at the Parker Industrial Ghost Ship, the board was panicking. Investors were threatening lawsuits. The FBI was combing through 20 years of financial records like a kid tearing apart wrapping paper on Christmas. Sean? He wasn't tearing apart anything. Because at 7:42 a.m. he tried to board a flight to Cancun with a duffel bag containing 3 passports, $14,000 cash, 2 burner phones, and ironically, the Rolex Dad bought him at 25. He didn't make it past TSA. Federal agents grabbed him at the gate, and the picture of him in handcuffs hit the business gossip groups within hours. I didn't see it until lunchtime. Someone slid their phone across the table like they were handing me a trophy. He looked terrified. And small. Like a child who suddenly realized charisma doesn't work on federal charges. Wire fraud. Bank fraud. Embezzlement. Interstate financial crimes. The kind of charges with mandatory prison time and zero sympathy. The golden boy had turned bronze. Then rust. Then dust. I didn't celebrate. Didn't cheer. Didn't even smile. Instead, I felt this cold, heavy clarity settle in my chest. This wasn't revenge. This was balance. Back in my new office, Adrian leaned in my doorway. Hell of a week, isn't it? You could say that. I replied. So, he said, tapping the folder in my hand. You ready to run operations for us? I nodded. Good. Because we're absorbing your father's entire West Coast logistics arm. And we want you leading the restructure. I blinked. Me. Leading. Not assisting. Not being overlooked. Not being the second choice son or the backup plan. Leading. And that's when it hit me. My father didn't just lose his company. He lost the future it could have had under me. If he trusted me, not Sean Parker Industrial wouldn't have become a cautionary tale. It would have become a legacy. Instead, I was the legacy now. Of my own making. On the bus home that night, still didn't have a car, my father called. I didn't answer. He texted. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry I never said it sooner. I stared at the message for a long minute. Then I closed my phone. Because pride from someone who only offers it after you've built a throne out of their ruins? That's not pride. That's regret wearing makeup. And he could keep it. Here's the strange thing about getting everything you ever deserved. It doesn't hit you like a victory parade. It creeps in slowly like warmth returning to a limb you thought was permanently numb. Connolly promoted me again before my 3rd month was up. Director of Operations for the entire Western Division. Staff. Office. Salary. Benefits. Stock options. A parking spot with my name on it, even though I still took the bus out of habit. For the first time in my life, people didn't look through me. They looked to me. For answers. For direction. For leadership. And I gave it to them. Because running operations wasn't new. I'd been doing it at Parker Industrial for a decade. The only difference now? I was being paid for my value instead of punished for it. Meanwhile, back in the ruins of the Parker name, the fallout spread like wildfire. Employees survived, they kept their jobs under Connolly. Investors got their payouts. The board members landed on their feet. The only ones who didn't? The ones who created the mess. Sean sat in federal holding awaiting trial. Dad sold his house downsized to a retirement community in Arizona. Everything he built, everything he worshipped, evaporated. And me? I was rebuilding my life from the ashes they stuffed me in. One morning, near the end of my 6th month with Connolly, I was grabbing coffee in the break room when someone knocked lightly on the doorframe. Arthur. The man who'd betrayed me. Then saved me. Then vanished again. He looked older, like the stress had carved 10 new years into his face. But his eyes were clearer. Got a minute? He asked. We sat in my office. He handed me a cup of coffee. The expensive kind. Your father asked me to give you something. he said. He pulled out an envelope. Cream-colored. Thick. My name on the front in my father's handwriting still sharp, but shakier than it used to be. I didn't open it, Arthur added quickly. Not my business. I didn't reach for it. He also said, he knows it's too late to fix what he broke, Arthur added. But he wanted you to have your share from the sale. I finally opened the envelope. A check. $400,000. My breath caught in my throat. Not because of the amount, though God knows it changed things for me, but because of what it represented. It was an admission. A confession. A white flag. Blood money. Guilt money. Too late money. Arthur watched me quietly. What do you want me to tell him? He asked. I folded the check and slid it into my jacket pocket. Tell him I got it. Arthur nodded, standing to leave. Before he did, he paused at the door. You know, he said. Most people would have folded under what happened to you. I didn't respond. He shook his head, smiled a tired smile. But you came out the other side. Intact. Better. Stronger. That's not luck, Liam. That's character. After he left, I sat there alone in my office, staring at the skyline through glass walls. 6 months earlier, I'd been sleeping in my car. Now I had a home. A future. A career. A reputation rebuilt from nothing. Sean had destroyed himself. Dad had gambled and lost. And me? I'd survived something that should have buried me. And I wasn't done rising. Not even close. 6 months after the acquisition, I drove to my apartment after a long strategy meeting, expecting silence, leftovers, and maybe 6 hours of sleep if the universe felt generous. Instead, I found Arthur sitting on the steps outside my building holding 2 coffees like he was auditioning for the world's saddest Starbucks commercial. He stood when he saw me, joints cracking like a man who'd spent too many years hunched over spreadsheets. Thought you might want company, he said. I didn't really. But I also didn't not. We sat at my tiny kitchen table, the same one I bought used for $30, back when $30 decided whether I ate that week. Arthur passed me one of the coffees. Your father's moving, he said. Yeah. Arizona. Warm weather. Fresh start. I said it flat, like reading a traffic report. He asked me to tell you something? I didn't ask. I just waited. He said he knows he can't fix it. But he wanted you to have a chance at something better. Even if it's late. I leaned back, the chair creaking under me. Late. I repeated. That's one word for it. Arthur nodded, eyes drifting to the peeling paint on my wall. Sometimes the apology isn't for you. It's for the part of him he still recognizes. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or scoff. But the truth hit me in a quiet, unexpected way. The story wasn't ending with revenge. It wasn't ending with some perfect, cinematic reconciliation either. It was just ending. Changing shape. Softening in places. Hardened in others. Arthur took a sip of coffee. Sean's trial is in March, he said. They're pushing for full sentencing. Good. You going? No. And I meant it. Watching him get sentenced would feel like watching a fire I didn't start finish burning. Pointless. Arthur nodded slowly. He's begging your father for help, you know. I blinked. He calls every day from holding. Arthur added, voice soft. Your father won't take the calls. That hit harder than I expected. Not because I felt bad for Sean, I didn't. But because it was the first time in our entire lives that Dad didn't choose him. Arthur stood to leave. At the door, he said, whatever you think of your father, signing that check was the first real thing he's done in a long time. After he left, I sat there in the quiet, the check still in my pocket, my apartment warm for once instead of drafty. I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. Not in the way that eats you alive. What I felt now was distance. A wide, empty stretch where family used to be. A silence that wasn't painful, just honest. I looked around my small apartment, then at the lights of the city through the window. My life wasn't perfect. But it was mine again. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something I had to survive. It felt like something I could build. A week after Arthur's visit, I sat in my new office staring at the city lights through floor-to-ceiling glass, still getting used to the fact that I had windows again, that I wasn't living in a concrete shoebox that smelled like old microwave popcorn and despair. Adrian had just left me with a stack of expansion proposals and a casual, We're moving fast, Liam. You're one of the engines now. Engine. Not liability. Not background noise. Not the forgotten son. Engine. Funny how a single word could feel like someone handing you your own spine back. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I hadn't seen since before the collapse. Dad. Moving trucks came today. Arizona by next week. Hope you're well. Proud of you, son. Son. I stared at the word for a long time. It didn't hurt. It didn't heal. It just existed. A ghost of something that used to matter. I didn't reply. The next morning, as I walked into Connolly headquarters, someone was waiting by the front desk, hair messy, clothes wrinkled, eyes hollow. Sean. Or what was left of him. He looked like a man who'd been chewed up by his own arrogance and spit out by reality. Liam, he said, voice cracking. I didn't answer. Just watched him the way a firefighter might watch a building that had already burned to the ground. He stepped closer. Please, he whispered. You have to help me. Help him. My brother, the same man who forged my signature, framed me for nearly $1 million of theft, let Dad throw me out like rotten trash, and watched me lose everything, was now shaking in front of me like a child afraid of the dark. I'm facing 15 years, he said. Maybe more. They won't give me a deal. Dad won't talk to me. Everybody's gone. He wiped his face. You're all I have left. There are moments in life where everything goes silent. Not peaceful silent, just empty. A blank page where emotions should be. That's what hit me then. I wasn't angry. I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't vindicated. Just empty. Because there's no victory in seeing someone you once loved reduced to rubble. But there's no obligation either. Sean, I said quietly, you made your choices. I know, he whispered, voice breaking. But please just talk to the prosecutors for me. Just tell them I'm not a bad person. I held his gaze for a long moment. You are a bad person, I said gently. Not because you stole money, but because you destroyed your own family to do it. He flinched. You tried to ruin me to save yourself. You let Dad disown me. You watched me lose everything. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. And now you're here because you finally realized consequences aren't just stories told to children. Silence. People passing in the lobby didn't interrupt. Something about the moment must have warned them not to. Sean's shoulders collapsed. So you won't help me? He whispered. No, I said. I won't. He nodded once, tiny, defeated, and walked out of the building. No threats. No tantrums. No bravado. Just a man watching the walls close in. I stood there long after he left, hands in my pockets, the lobby quiet again. That was the day I understood something crystal clear. Some people drown because they trip. Others drown because they dive in head first. Sean Dove. All I did was let the water do what water does. I didn't see Sean again for 3 weeks. Not because he stopped trying. He called, texted, left voicemails that swung between begging, bargaining, and blaming, but because I blocked his number everywhere except email. And even then, his messages went straight to a folder I didn't open unless I needed a reminder of what survival looked like. By the time the federal sentencing date rolled around, Connolly had fully absorbed what used to be Parker Industrial. My days were a blur of strategy sessions, warehouse tours, integration reports, and meetings with teams who finally treated me like the guy who held the blueprint instead of the guy who swept the scraps. One morning, during a supply chain forecast review, Adrian pulled me aside. You know Sean will try again, he said. I shrugged. He already has. And your father? I paused. That was harder to define. Dad had moved to Arizona, golf courses, low taxes, neighbors who wore Hawaiian shirts, the whole early retirement cliché. He sent me occasional texts, photos of sunsets, a recipe he tried, a link to an article about supply chain efficiencies, like he was trying to make small talk with a son he'd forgotten how to parent. We weren't estranged. We weren't close. We were orbiting. Two people who shared blood but not shape anymore. I told Adrian. He's doing whatever retired men do when they're trying not to think about everything they lost. Adrian nodded. He'll reach out eventually. Maybe, I said. But I won't wait for it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table Arthur once sat at when he delivered the envelope, and opened my laptop to look through supply numbers. But I didn't get far. Because there, sitting in my inbox, was a message from my father. No subject line. Just one sentence. Sean asked me today why you won't help him. I stared at it. Not for the question. Not for the guilt laced into it. But because I could almost hear his voice, quiet, tired, carrying the weight of a lifetime of choosing wrong. I typed back slowly. Because helping him now wouldn't save him. Dad replied 5 minutes later. Then what would? I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't soften it. I didn't rewrite reality to make it easier to swallow. Accountability. No response. Not that night. Not for the next 2 days. But on day 3, around 11 p.m., he finally answered. Then maybe this is the first time he'll have to face life without someone cleaning up after him. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't a reunion. But it was the first honest sentence he'd said in years. As I closed the laptop, the city lights reflecting off the window, I realized part 10 of this story wasn't an ending, or even a climax. It was a transition. A quiet shift in the current. A recognition that family doesn't break cleanly, it crumbles, then rearranges itself into something new. Something smaller, maybe. But real. My father wasn't whole. I wasn't either. Neither was the family we used to be. But maybe, just maybe, we were starting to look at the rubble instead of pretending it wasn't there. And for the first time in a long time, the path forward didn't feel like revenge or survival. It just felt like living. By the time spring rolled around, the dust of the Parker collapse had finally settled, but the echoes? Those lingered. Sean's trial date was a month away. My father had gone quiet again in the Arizona heat. And me? I was learning how to build a life that wasn't shaped around cleaning up after other people's disasters. Strange skill to learn at 38. One Tuesday morning, I was walking through Connolly's executive floor, half listening to a logistics forecast, when Leah, our receptionist, flagged me down with a look I'd never seen her wear before. Liam? She said, voice low. Someone's here asking for you. My stomach dropped for a second. Not because I expected Sean, but because a man learns to be wary after being blindsided enough times. Who? I asked. She hesitated. A boy, she said. Teenager. Says he's your nephew. My chest tightened. I followed her to the lobby, and there he was, thin, nervous, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes darting like he was afraid of being yelled at for breathing. Sean's son. Evan. Last time I saw him, he was 8 and building a crooked Lego tower at a family barbecue where Sean bragged about deals he didn't actually close. Now he was 16, and he looked like a kid carrying more weight than his bones were designed for. He spotted me and exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a month. Uncle Liam? He said, voice cracking. Hey, I said gently. What's going on? He swallowed hard. Can we talk somewhere not public? I led him to an empty conference room, closed the door, and waited. He didn't sit. Instead, he stood there twisting the strap of his backpack, shaking like he was about to confess a crime. It's my dad, he said. Mom says we shouldn't talk to you. Grandpa won't answer questions. Nobody tells me anything except that Dad might go to prison forever. His voice broke at the last word. I need to know what he did. He whispered. For real. My throat tightened. This kid wasn't asking out of curiosity. He was asking because his world had tilted and he needed solid ground before it crushed him. So I told him the truth. Not everything, not the gritty details, not the rage, not the betrayal, but enough. Enough that he understood his father wasn't a victim of an evil uncle or a vindictive system. He stole money, I said softly. A lot of it. And he framed me when I found out. Evan looked down at his shoes for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. Did he ever love us? Or was it all just lies? That hit harder than anything Sean ever did to me. I stepped closer, lowered my voice. Evan, I said, your dad made terrible decisions. But that doesn't mean he didn't love you. It means he didn't know how to be the man he should have been. He blinked fast, trying not to cry. Are you mad at me? He asked. The question gutted me. No, I said immediately. You didn't do any of this. None of it is yours to carry. He nodded, shoulders shaking with a quiet relief that told me he'd been terrified of hearing the opposite. Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out a crumpled envelope. He told me to give you this, he said. He said you're the only person he has left who might listen. I took the envelope, feeling its weight even though it was thin. Evan sniffed, wiping his face with his sleeve. If he goes to prison, can I still talk to you? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Anytime. He nodded, swallowed again, then whispered, "Thank you," before slipping out of the room like a shadow. When the door closed, I looked down at the envelope in my hand. My name, written in Sean's messy handwriting. Shaking strokes. Ink smudges. I wasn't ready to open it. Not yet. Because for the first time in this whole mess, I felt the cost of everything, not on me, not on Dad, not on Sean, but on the next generation caught in the crossfire. And I knew, wasn't just another chapter. This was the pivot. The place where the past stopped repeating. Or at least where I decided it had to. I didn't open the envelope until after midnight. The city was quiet, my apartment dim except for the lamp over my kitchen table, the same table where I once ate dollar store pasta, wondering how the hell my life had collapsed so completely. Now I sat there as a man rebuilt. A man with something to lose again. And maybe something to forgive, or at least understand. I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, lined, torn from a cheap spiral notebook. Sean's handwriting messy, rushed, like he'd written it with his wrist shaking. Liam. If you're reading this, I'm out of time. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to read past the first line. But I need one truth on record before the world decides who I am. I stole the money. All of it. It was me. Not you. Never you. I told myself I deserved it. That Dad owed me for choosing you to run things while I was still stuck trying to impress him. I told myself you'd be fine. You were always fine. You were good at everything. I was good at looking like I was good at everything. I framed you because I panicked. Because I'd already dug the hole too deep, and you saw it. And instead of climbing out, I shoved you in so I wouldn't fall alone. I don't expect you to care what happens to me. I just needed you to know one thing. I always knew you were the better man. That's why I hated you. That's why I followed you into every room like a shadow trying to steal your shape. I never earned anything. You earned everything. If Evan asks, tell him I wasn't always a monster. Tell him I tried. Even if it wasn't enough. Sean. I read it twice. Then a third time. Not because I was unsure of its meaning. But because I didn't know what I felt. Grief? Maybe. Anger? Less than I expected. Pity? Some. Closure? Absolutely. Sean wasn't a villain from a movie. He was a man who made every wrong decision possible until there was no road left. Some people ruin others. Some ruin themselves. Sean managed both. I folded the letter carefully, not out of sentiment, but because it wasn't a weapon anymore. It was evidence of something smaller, sadder, a brother who never learned how to be a man until it was too late. The next morning, I called my father. He answered on the second ring, voice soft with age and regret. "It's done," I told him. He admitted everything. Dad exhaled slow, heavy, like a man releasing 20 years of denial. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. And for the first time since this nightmare began, it was true. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "I should have said it sooner." "You should have," I replied. "But saying it now is better than never." We talked for a few minutes about Arizona, about his health, about nothing and everything. It wasn't father and son. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was two men trying. After we hung up, I headed into Connolly for the quarterly operations meeting. My team greeted me with nods, respect, trust, things I used to dream of while loading trucks in the cold, wishing someone would just see the work I was killing myself to do. And as I sat at the head of the conference table, something settled in me, steady, quiet, earned. I didn't rise because someone gave me a hand. I didn't rise because I was the favorite. I didn't rise because I was lucky. I rose because after being dragged to the bottom, I chose to climb. Every step. Every bruise. Every night in the car. Every humiliation. It all became the foundation of the life I had now. A life built by my hands alone. Later that evening, my phone buzzed an unknown number. Not Sean, not Dad. Evan. "Can we talk again sometime?" I smiled. "Anytime," I replied. And that was the real ending. Not revenge. Not triumph. Not destruction. Legacy. Not the one my father built or Sean ruined. The one I started myself, from nothing.